Interplanetary canon, death by black hole, and a human computer. These are some of the hard science fiction ideas put forth in the new anthology Carbide Tipped Pens from Tor Books. That's the book I'll be reviewing on this episode and over 2 more episodes of SFF180. Hello everybody, Thomas here. Thank you so much for joining me. Love having you. Now, hard science fiction has not been quite as commercially popular in recent years as it has been in the past, but a great many readers and writers have continued to carry the hard SF torch. And this anthology, I hope, will bring about a resurgence of a kind of a new generation of hard SF, that which marries Campbellian rationality to stories that have a relatable human dimension, and that aren't just, as a great many critics of hard SF have liked to point out, just nuts and bolts stories. Now, the creative template that has historically been followed in hard science fiction was primarily set in motion by John W. Campbell Jr., the legendary editor of Astounding magazine, which of course went on to become Analog. Campbell prompted his writers to present accurate science, at least as accurate as it was back in the day, as their story's primary plot engine, resulting in tales that had intellectual substance and that would stand as a repudiation of the common stereotype that sci-fi was just juvenile tosh, just that crazy Flash Gordon stuff. Ben Bova carried on this tradition as Analog's editor from 1972 to 78, and Analog stories quickly became associated with a specific formula, the solve the problem story, where a problem happens, right? And characters deal with the problem by sciencing the hell out of it. There has been a great deal of excellent classic work in Analog magazine, but sometimes the focus on the technical tended to leave such human elements as character development and emotion shortchanged. Now, Ben Bova has co-edited Carbide Tipped Pens with aerospace engineer Eric Choi, and it's a book full of very good new hard SF tales featuring a broad diversity of voices and some fresh ideas. It's also really eager, maybe a little bit too eager, to counter the assumption that hard SF is just cold and technical. And we see this right from the very first tale, The Blue Afternoon That Lasted Forever by Daniel H. Wilson of Robopocalypse fame. This is a straight-up end-of-the-world scenario from the point of view of a physicist with a little daughter, and this is one where, despite its sunny Ray Bradbury-esque title, science probably will not be able to save the day. But it is affecting, I think, mainly because of its brevity, which prevents it, and helps it avoid any risk of slipping into mawkish sentimentality. It really does kind of get you, and I think it's the equivalent of leading with your best punch, and it sets the tone for a lot of what follows. The second story, A Slow Unfurling of Truth, is a quietly powerful novelette by Aliette de Bedard, dealing with the themes of identity and cultural heritage and personal duty. It's a fine tale. It will have readers seeking out other work by its author. It's set upon a space colony called Celestial Spires, which was once under the rule of tyrannical leaders known as the Galactics, but no longer, and a member of the colony's former ruling collective must deal with the possible return of a long-vanished colleague who possesses a fragment of an encryption key that was used to hide vital information about the colony's history from the former galactic rulers. But is this man really who he claims to be? It's a difficult question because the technology exists to allow someone to so thoroughly change their identities that you can change bodies, change every single aspect of your personality. So much so that trained authenticators must be hired in order to confirm you really are who you say you are. And this is a process that can take weeks or months or more. Now, of course, the hard SF element here concerns this technology of identity replacement and the methods employed by the authenticator Q and her AI companion to peel back the layers of concealment to get to the real person underneath. And as it turns out, these are not methods that are entirely immune to the authenticator's personal biases. The only thing the story's missing that I think would have been a really interesting detail would be any indication of whether or not this technology was developed in response to and as an act of rebellion against galactic rule, to help basically dissidents and rebels hide or whether it existed beforehand. But apart from that, good stuff. The third story, Thunderwell by Doug Beeson, will remind readers, superficially, of Andy Weir's The Martian. The first manned expedition to Mars looks like it's going to come to grief when both of its resupply ships fail to make proper entry into the red planet's atmosphere. Now, this sets into motion one of those so crazy it just might work plans, but the political fallout in implementing this desperate procedure will be massive. Now it is up to Heather Lewis, a high-ranking member of the President's cabinet in charge of what does and what does not happen with the nation's nuclear stockpile, to make a decision that could save the astronauts, but which would require her to essentially sacrifice herself, both politically and personally, as the mission commander happens to be her husband. Now, the story offers a good, solid, hard SF problem to solve, plus believable conflict and suspense, but its attempts at emotional gravitas aren't quite as successful as they could be, mainly because none of the Mars astronauts is really developed as a character. So the bond between husband and wife here isn't really depicted as powerfully as it could have been in order to provide the story with the emotional core it's seeking. Some readers might think that there really wasn't any need to have made Heather Lewis the wife of the Mars mission commander, but still, if it had been overdone, I guess it's the kind of thing that could very easily have slipped into overwrought melodrama, so perhaps your mileage will vary. But otherwise, again, I think a good, strong entry and very compelling storytelling. The Circle comes next, a story by Chinese superstar Liu Zijian, extracted from his novel The Three-Body Problem and translated by multi-award-winning author Ken Liu. Now, set during China's Warring States period, which was around the 2nd and 3rd century BCE, the story begins when an envoy from a rebellious king has his life spared by the king of the state of Qin, who believes that the envoy's great mathematical skills can point to the secret of everlasting life. Given an impossible time frame in which to satisfy the king's demands, the envoy comes up with a revolutionary solution. He invents a human computer comprised of millions of soldiers from Qin's army. But is the envoy after something? Something else that he's not letting on? Is there more going on behind the scenes than we are first aware of? The story is brilliantly concise in its execution, keeping you guessing, drawing you into its trap, and then delivering a bitterly ironic coup de grace. This is the kind of story that makes you wish that the US would make best-selling superstar writers out of guys like Liu Zijian instead of some of the scribbly hacks we ordinarily do. Now, moving on, I was far more charmed than I expected to be by Ben Bova's own entry in the book, Old Timer's Game. This is a story about baseball, of all things, something I couldn't care less about. But like all well-told stories, the writing here sparked my interest, and I guess it's proof that hard science fiction can literally be about anything. It's a story about what happens when performance enhancement, that ultimate of all sins in the world of sports, is taken to its logical conclusion. As short as the tale is, it offers an earthily likable protagonist, a clever solution to the problem at hand, and Ben Bova's own love of the game really shines through. The sixth story, The Snows of Yesteryear by Canadian writer Jean-Louis Trudel, a new writer to me, but apparently a guy with quite a long track record writing in both French and English up in Canada. Sadly, his climate change-inspired tale is the first in the anthology that just did not work for me, feeling far more like a sketch of some potentially good ideas than a fully realized story in its own right. Now, the basic conflict, I guess, is between two rival groups, right? One that seeks to continue the relentless pursuit of corporate profit in spite of the changed world, and then the other, of course, comprised of idealistic scientists motivated by altruism, who have made a breakthrough in resurrecting Pliocene microorganisms. The narrative here feels like a scene taken from something longer. But unlike The Circle, which actually is a scene taken from something longer, this just does not satisfy on its own. So those are the first 6 of 17 stories in Carbide tipped pens, and on the whole I can say that if you've been eager to get your hard science on, well, this is an anthology that's offering some really good tales with which you can scratch that particular itch. Now I'll continue this review in part 2, which I'll try to get to fairly soon, but for now, that's all I got time for on this episode of SFF180. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Love having all my viewers. Remember the most important thing, these are reviews. You will not always agree with me, but if you enjoyed watching, please leave a like, share this video far and wide with your SFF reading friends on social media, and most importantly, and this is backed up by some fascinating new research and data from the world of science, people who click subscribe buttons on videos like these often find themselves 11% more likely to develop a particular random superpower anywhere from within 24 hours to 6 months. So hey, no promises, but give that a test. The data might be fascinating. And until I see all of you next time, happy reading.